As we progress in our study of short stories and how to analyze short stories, it's important that we cover two literary elements that are, in my opinion, the most often confused and mixed up. And those terms are tone and mood. When we begin to deconstruct short stories and analyze them for theme or meaning, tone and mood play an important role in our ability to do this. So we need to know what they are and how to do that. So what are tone and mood, and how do we tell the difference between the two? Well, I'm sure you've all used or heard the terms mood or tone outside of class. For example, I'm sure you've told your friend that you're in a really bad mood today, or your mother has warned you not to take that tone with her. You know what those words mean in those examples, so why do we need to discuss them? Well, tone and mood in a literary sense have a different meaning than they do in everyday conversation. In this instructional video, we're first going to discuss and define tone. Next, we'll look at the meaning of mood. Finally, we'll look at an example text and identify how tone is being used and how mood is being conveyed. So, what do we mean when we say an author's use of tone? Well, in literature, tone can be defined as the expression of an author's attitude toward his or her subject matter, the characters, their setting, and the action they undertake and undergo. So, essentially, tone is how an author feels about the story or aspects of the story. What I really want you to pull out of that definition is that last part, that being tone is how the author feels. When we analyze for tone, we're looking at how the author is expressing themselves in their story as a whole or in parts of their story. So then, how can we scan for or recognize tone? Tone is expressed or revealed through the author's diction, which, if you don't know what diction is, it's the choice and arrangement of specific words and types of words to tell a story. Word choice, what words does the author choose to use in his or her story? And imagery, the vivid mental images you get in your head when you read. And a few other aspects contribute to author style. And if you remember from our previous lesson, style is the way an author uses language when he or she writes. One additional point I must make is that you must be careful not to confuse the author with the narrator. Just because the narrator says something doesn't mean the author feels that way, which means it isn't always an example of tone. So if that's tone, then what is mood? Well, mood is the atmosphere that is created by an author's choice of details and the words with which to present them. Another way of saying this is to say mood is how the writing and details of a story make the reader feel. Like with our definition of tone, what I want you to pull out of this definition is the word atmosphere and the phrase how the reader feels. Mood is the overall feeling you have when you read a piece. How does the atmosphere surrounding of the work make you feel? Like tone, mood is revealed through the writer's style. Now, as we talked about earlier, tone and mood are often confused. So how can you remember which is which? Well, here's a good tip for differentiating between the two terms. Tone is how the author feels about the story or aspects of the story. Mood is how the reader feels about the story or aspects of the story. So if you do get confused or can't remember, tone comes from the author, mood comes from you, the reader. Having defined these terms, let's take a look at how they function in a short story. The following is an excerpt from Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. So how can we determine the author's tone here? Well, let's look at some of the word choices Poe makes. In this just one paragraph, words like revenge, insult, threat, avenged, punish, retribution are used. What does this tell us about Poe's tone? Well, they convey a very serious tone, a tone that may suggest some kind of impending action or payback. When the author continually uses these types of words, it implies a dramatic story or situation, thus informing us that the author's tone is heightened and serious. So, we just looked at how to analyze tone. How can we analyze mood? Well, let's look at another example from the Cask of Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and ascending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th side the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior crypt or recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. Take a second or two to jot down how that paragraph made you feel. Well, for me, the mood of that paragraph is very dark and sort of creepy. The fact that Poe describes the characters descending and the presence of human bone really suggests that the mood of the story is pretty dark. And I'd venture to say that most of you wrote down you felt creeped out, disturbed, or maybe even scared. Well, maybe not that far, but I hope you see the point. Through the author's writing, mood is created that we, the readers, feel.